Hello there, my name is Oscar Jens. So I am with Amnesty International UK, and I'm the country coordinator for Iran and the UAE. So I basically try to work for Ahmed. So to give you a bit of background, I started this post about a year ago, and I really didn't know much about the UAE. And I suspect that's the case with most people in this room. When we think of the United Arab Emirates or hear the names Dubai or Abu Dhabi, we think of the luxury airlines, skyscrapers, football clubs, luxury developments. We think of an easy international jet-setting life. But however, this is a facade that the Emirati government has built up very specifically to hide what is underneath. And what is underneath is one of the most brutal police states in the Middle East. The United Arab Emirates has the highest ratio of political prisoners to its own population, possibly in the entire world. Its skyscrapers have been built by modern-day slaves from Nepal and India who are regularly beaten and coerced to do work, often without pay and without any ability to contact their families. Rich Emirati households employ slaves or domestic workers from East Asia who are often subjected to physical and sexual violence. In Yemen, we hear constantly about famine and war, and we hear about the Saudis. We've heard of, for example, Khashoggi's killing. The war in Yemen is very much done by the Saudis, but also the Emiratis have really taken the driver's seat. A lot of the militias who are starving people, for example, in the city of Hodeidah, which you might have heard of, those militias are paid by the Emirati authorities. So beneath this fantastic veneer, which we all hear about and find extremely alluring, lies a very brutal reality. And very recently, this has come home. So part of the Emirati government strategy to sort of look impressive and hide its human rights violations happens here in Manchester. So for example, Manchester City Football Club, that ownership brings them prestige. By owning the football club, that means they can show their airline to everybody in the United Kingdom. So when you hear the Emirates, you don't think human rights violations, you do not think secret prisons in Yemen. You think luxury, nice airlines. And what we've always argued at Amnesty International is that the human rights of everybody is simply inviolable. And if somebody's human rights are violated, for example, in the UAE, sooner or later, those chickens will come home to roost and our rights will be violated. And rather recently, this was the case for one British citizen. Several of you might have heard of Matthew Hedges. So Matthew Hedges was a PhD researcher at Durham University, and he was researching the security apparatus of the Emirati state. And without a warning, he arrived there, he landed, he's been there before fine, he was arrested, and he was put in solitary confinement, he was drugged, and he had no connection to the outside world for half a year. It was only after his wife decided to go public that he was released, after the Emirati government was really shamed by this public outrage. And the question is, how did we get here? If the Emiratis invest and bring so much wealth and so much positive development into our country here in Manchester, or here to Manchester, how come they can arrest a British citizen with impunity? Aren't we partners? Well, this story begins before. I'll take you back to 2011. It's the Arab Spring. And the Arab Emirates, as mentioned before, is made up of 7 kingdoms, each ruled by an absolute ruler. The top ruler being the king of Abu Dhabi, number 2 being the king of Dubai. So people in the United Arab Emirates, hundreds of people, go online, go to the streets and demand, we want accountability, we want a parliament, we want democracy, we want a say in our own lives. The government reacted with essentially imprisoning these people. There was a famous trial called the UAE 94 trial, where 94 activists, pro-democracy activists and pillars of civil society were put on trial for demanding a say in their life. Defending these people were, amongst others, Ahmed Mansour and other prisoners of conscience such as Mohammed al-Rokan. Amnesty here in Manchester has adopted both Ahmed Mansour and Mohammed al-Rokan as prisoners of conscience to work for. So, in 2013, after the UA94 trial, they imprisoned 69 of these civil society leaders. A few years later, they went to those who defended the defenders. They took 5 civil society leaders, including Ahmed Mansour and Mohammed al-Rokan, and sentenced them to prison. Ahmed didn't go, but Mohammed was convicted. So we have this situation where you had a massive popular movement whose leaders are arrested. Then the defenders of those defenders are arrested. And what we have left is Ahmed Mansour, as Kate demonstrated. So Ahmed Mansour quite literally was the last human rights activist left in the country. We knew what was going on about, be it labor violations, be it police brutality, be it people being tortured or not allowed to see their family members in prison through Ahmed. But now that's gone and we really don't know what's happening. And to paint a sort of picture how drastic this is, I volunteer, this is a voluntary position I'm in. I have a day job just like everybody else. But over the past year, I get phone calls from random people saying, my nephew or my brother-in-law has been arrested in Dubai, he's been politically active before, can you help? And the answer is sort of, well, the person we'd go to would be Ahmed, but he's in prison. I am literally just some guy, right? Some guy. I can't help you. So we do our best, we try to put them in touch with someone. But this has been increasing a lot, and this is how desperate people are. They'll call a stranger abroad to somehow find help. And to bring back to Manchester, so how come the Emiratis are able to act with this impunity? Well, it's this image, as we mentioned before. This image really is their shield. And it's quite also, at the same time, it's their weakness. The only way they can get away with these things is because the Manchester City government and the British government haven't said enough is enough. Ahmed Mansour, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Quite tellingly, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for, and I quote, spreading lies about the UAE and portraying the UAE as a lawless land. The daughter of the Emir of Dubai has said, my father is a ruthless, heartless man, but the only thing he cares about is his reputation. And that's what their power is based on. Once we take their reputation away, once we expose the truth, that actually here in Manchester, the developments, as Jonathan Silver will point out, aren't quite what they were promised, that these have been false promises. Once we show them that behind these shiny airlines and luxury developments lies a brutal police state that will crush anybody who voices their right to be themselves. Once we start peeling that back, once we take away this image, their shield, they will be powerless and we can make a change, both here in Manchester and in the United Arab Emirates. And this is what this meeting is about today. At the end, after we've gotten all the information, we've heard from all the different stakeholders here, we'll come together and we can come up with some questions as a group, as all of us in this room, to ask the City Council. How come you haven't been talking about this? How come you haven't told the citizens here about that? And hopefully this will be the beginning of a change. Thank you.
So I'm here from Greater Manchester Housing Action, and Oscar's talked a bit about Abu Dhabi. I'm going to let you know how they've ended up investing so much in our city. Who would have thought 10, 15, 20 years ago that international property capital would be arriving from all over the world into our city, transforming areas like Ancoats into these new shiny skyscrapers? And in a report we released earlier in the year, we argued that this has been enabled through this idea of housing financialisation, that instead of our homes being our homes, they're turned into assets for the international property class. And Manchester City Council has purposefully designed their policy, their planning regimes, and their actions around trying to attract this capital. And they want to build a city where social and affordable housing is pushed out of this gleaming new city centre, and all we're left with is shiny bars and people that can afford the shiny bars. So if that's the background, and you can read the report on the Greater Manchester Housing Action website about this process, then how have we got to a position where a public authority is now in partnership with this regime that Oscar's described is uncomfortable for some of us? So Manchester Life is the company, but it's not one company, it's actually many companies. And the council went into a partnership with Abu Dhabi United Group, a private equity owned by Sheikh Mansour, member of the royal family in Abu Dhabi, Minister of Presidential Affairs, owner of Manchester City. There are 4 directors to Manchester Life. One of them is Sir Richard Lees, our council leader. Another was Howard Bernstein, Sir Howard Bernstein, who was our top civil servant in the city, but is now working for the City Football Group. So we see how the directors can be representing the city 1 minute and then 6 months later are working for the other side. So there was a range of plans put into place, and I'm sure Jackie can tell us more about what's happened in East Manchester over the last 20 years. But we got into a situation where public land, our land, the land of the Manchester people, was parcelled up into different development companies and put through Loom Holdings based in Jersey and developed by Manchester Life. Now, is there corruption going on? We don't know. Why don't we know? Well, because there's a level of secrecy and transparency around Manchester Life that means that we as campaigners can't find out what's going on. And why are these companies based in Jersey? Well, one reason is that we can't find out the public accounts. So, Manchester Life and its holdings, such as Loom Holdings, now have built 1,000 apartments in Nancoats. There's plans for 6,000 to 10,000 more over the next 10 years. They bought up the Ancoats retail park recently, Toys R Us. This is our land. This is land owned by the council and by us. And yet, we only see one type of housing being built, and that's the housing of market rent. Yeah, and they some are for sale, but mainly they're market rent, and they're £600, £700, £800 a month. They're not meant for everyone in Manchester. They're only meant for the people the council want to attract into the city centre to bring council tax and other things. So, during the research we did about all this housing, we looked particularly at what was going on with Manchester Life. And if you build housing in Manchester, you're supposed to make a contribution to the city. You can't just come and use the land. You have to find ways of contributing back. So, under current council policy, we should have seen something like 300 new social and affordable homes out of this deal. How many did we see? 0. We should have seen financial contributions for neighbourhood services through Section 106 that might pay towards, for instance, Ancoats dispensary rehabilitation. How much money did they contribute in these deals? 0. So there's a range of other things that I think are problematic about this deal. The financial arrangements are obscured. When people have put in freedom of information requests, the answer is silence. And in fact, Nicholas stood at the back has put in a freedom of information request, and through leaks sent to the German newspaper Der Spiegel, we find that our city council is passing on those requests to Abu Dhabi United Group to deal with. Is that right? Is that an open city? Is it a transparent city? No, it's not. I'm going to finish just with some final thoughts. Ancoats is being gentrified. The old working class neighbourhood is being turned into something else entirely. Heritage, like the Smith's Arms, demolished, and they saved the sign and put it on a fireplace for their new flats. So, look, there's a range of issues about this partnership. It's not just that it's about who's involved, Abu Dhabi, but also the kind of company that Manchester Life is and the city that it's trying to transform our city into. Thank you very much.
Jackie, yeah. Based on your experience of living in East Manchester, how do you feel about the Manchester Life Company and the wider council-led regeneration of your area?
It hasn't been good for Ancoats. Again, I was on the Ancoats dispensary vigil, sat outside there for 6 years. We never had any support from any single councillor in Manchester. So of course that didn't help our cause, because the land around it is owned by City Life. We thought that they wanted that land. First of all, it had been destroyed before that by Urban Splash, who would take the roof of the building for it to hopefully fall down, which it didn't. It's still there, still surrounded by scaffolding, deliberately left there to rot. We wanted that for the community, because everything in Ancoats has disappeared. Swimming baths, youth clubs, police club. There is nothing for the young people in Ancoats, and then you wonder why you get vandalism and all that sort of thing going on. The council have deliberately closed all these amenities down because, like it's been said, they don't want the ordinary people that lived in Ancoats around there anymore. What they're building is not affordable for the people that are being thrown out, which I am. I now owe Manchester City Council £50,000 because when they compulsory purchased my house, I didn't have enough money to buy a new one. So, plus the fact from moving from Ancoats to where I moved, my council tax jumped 2 bands, something that I didn't think that was going to be the case. I'd have to pay out more money because of the movement. Could just go on and on really. There's been nothing done, they've never listened to anybody that lived in Ancoats. We demonstrated when they pulled the Smith's Arms down. We had a open meeting where there was hundreds of people there. We all put notices around the building. Within 2 weeks, the building had gone. There isn't a pub. There's nowhere for the community to meet. You can't have discussion about what's going on because there's nowhere to meet. That was another reason why we were trying to save the dispensary. It would have been a community asset where people could have their say. And it's just, and at the moment, the dispensary is now back in ownership of the council. And we cannot find out what is going to happen to that building.
Okay. No. I think the second question has become kind of a rhetorical one, but let's ask it anyway. To what extent do you think that the communities, the working class community in the area has been included or excluded from the process?
Totally excluded. Totally excluded. Never listened to, don't answer questions, ask you for your opinions, but totally ignored. No opinions of the people have given.
So you're being asked and then nothing happens as a result?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely ignored.
Anything else you'd like to add before we open it up? Okay, let's open that up. Yeah? So, are there any specific questions you'd like to ask to Jackie?
Not specific questions, but because I've run Manchester Shield, I've even tried to confront people about the UAE, the relationship. I've been told off by officials who have exposed my details online. I've been hacked. I know lots of other people who have. This is a city of property politicians. There is no love of the people at all. They have turned their own position of power into property, their own property empire. We have Bernstein, we have the Roscoes, we have Sir Richard Leese. They should be accountable. They should be here today. And the fact that they're not, we may have momentum coming later with Ben Clay. But what I think is happening in Manchester, we have a few people deciding the fate for everyone. They're the most disingenuous, deceptive bullies that I have ever met in my life. And I think it's time people stood up against them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? A comment or a question? A thought, a response at this moment? Yeah.
Did they set up, are you saying then that they set up like a fake consultation?
Fake consultations? Yes, really. During the PFI process and the compulsory purchase, yes, we had meetings. Yes, they told us, oh, we would be out of pocket, we would be rehoused, we could stay with neighbours, and none of that happened. None of it happened. We had to find our own places because they pulled that many places down. There was nowhere else for us to move in the area. We just had to move, and I don't live in Ancoats now. I live out in Openshaw. You know, I passed where I live 10.5 years later, and all that's there is a car park. Not an official car park, just car parking in the street and in the drive where I used to live. I could cry each time I passed that street. Like this morning coming down here, 10.5 years, I still could have been there. But what it is, it's on the corner of Oldham Road and Butler Street. It is prime land, and that won't get built on until they get the largest amount of money to develop it.
Thank you.
Can I
Yes.
just ask Jackie a quick question? Do you know how many CPOs there was 10 years ago in that region?
Oh,
Approximately.
How many what?
CPOs.
yeah, I was
CPOs.
getting on for 300. Yeah.
What is a CPO? There's been question.
Uh,
Sorry, say that one person.
A compulsory purchase order?
Compulsory purchase order.
By the council. The council compulsory purchase your property.
But not heritage and not assets and not places that
No,
they
no,
publish.
and we don't get paid for the land it was on either.
Okay, we have a little bit more time. Anyone else? Comments or Diego?
Sorry, did you say you were £50,000 out of pocket?
Yes,
Can you explain how that is?
because I wasn't given it. Your house sells for its what they say market value, right? Well, in Ancoats, that market value that wasn't very strong. It's not like it is now. What you're going to pay for a property. So when I come to purchase another house, I didn't have enough money to buy on, and they loaned me £50,000, which is payable when it's sold, plus any a share of any profit it's made on its increase. So it's owed to them until that property is sold, which is something hanging over my head.
Did anyone, sorry.
Yeah, last one, very quickly.
In terms of sort of the elected representatives and the councillors, did you, I mean, what about the option of sort of replacing the ones that weren't representing you properly and trying to get someone else elected?
Listen, no, we had plenty of councillors who were supposedly listening to us. We were told, like, it wouldn't cost you, you wouldn't be out of pocket and everything else. That was totally ignored. You know, everything they told us was ignored, and it was a lie. And now the same thing is happening in Colliers, and I know people that were on the steering group with me for 2. Yeah.
So after this experience, what's the one lesson you've learnt now?
Don't listen to anything, don't believe anything they're telling you, not a single thing.
Okay, we're going to stop the clock. Why do you think Abu Dhabi are in partnership with the Manchester City Council?
Money, power, basically. Abu Dhabi is phenomenally wealthy. It has oil and gas reserves that equal some of the top oil producing countries in the world, and it needs to get that money out of the ground and into investments that go into the pockets of the ruling elite, who are the people who are in business with the city. So they invest all over the world, and this is just one example of where they're doing that. What does it give them? It gives them power locally, it gives them political power here, which is a major centre of political power in the UK. It bolsters their ability to do business deals with the British government, and it helps them sort of burnish their international reputation. So that's a sort of short answer, but basically it's about money and power and influence, and they aggressively leverage their political and economic clout to do that.
Can you say a bit more about aggressively?
They're one of the most aggressive governments in the Middle East. The way they conduct their foreign policy, whether it's in Yemen, where they've been told to, shoulder to shoulder with the Saudi Arabians and decimating that country and causing one of the world's most appalling humanitarian catastrophe. That's the Emiratis. They're involved in various conflicts around the globe. Domestically, you've got Ahmed's case. They have got a state security apparatus that goes around the streets and just takes people off the streets, puts them into custom-made 4x4s and hauls them off to places to be tortured. And the way they sort of conduct their business deals is completely the same as the way they conduct their policies. John mentioned that their Spiegel article, that was fascinating insight, if any of you read it, into how they do business. There was a line in it from Simon Pearce, who's a key lieutenant of the Abu Dhabi government, and he basically said, we do what we want, and they do. So, yeah.
Thanks. And what do you feel are the risks for the city in carrying on this partnership?
Again, I put that, reframe that in a sort of positive response. I would say the risks are this, you are the risks. This is a the levels of depravity and criminality involved in Abu Dhabi mean that you're going to keep seeing cases like Matthew Hedges, you're going to keep seeing cases like Ahmed Mansour, you're going to keep seeing more abuses in Yemen. So that's going to be a stain on their reputation, but it's only a problem for them if people here and elsewhere sort of stand up and say, well, you're not having, we're not having that in our city or linked to our city. So when people like, Kate and John and Peggy come together, I'm sorry for not naming all the names of the people who've made this happen today, but when you come here today and listen to this and get engaged on that, that's a huge risk for them because of how abusive they are. So they're taking note of this, they know this is happening, they're following this closely. Manchester City Football Club, the people in charge of that, the PR people who are in charge of that is the Abu Dhabi government. There's no difference between Manchester City, the people who run it, and the Abu Dhabi government. They're the same people. And they're paying very close attention to what's happening here, very close attention to the fact that people are saying we're not happy with this. And you collectively are a big problem for them. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I just really like to sort of comment on that and really run that home. The only reason they're here is because this brings them prestige, Manchester City, name being associated with them shields them. Once we sort of throw that off, like we are the biggest risk, everybody in this room is their largest risk. It's very easy to think that, well, it's really far away, I don't have any power, but the answer is they came here because you have power. And they only have power as long as we're silent. Once we start voicing our opinions, once we start voicing that actually we don't have any of this is terrible, what are you doing? They lose that power. And I really want to bring that home that it's my heart to think that these governments are afraid of you. That's why they're keeping tabs on us. That's why many of us can't travel there, because they're afraid of a person simply using their voice, simply saying things.
The same here with our council. It's exactly the same. It's a mirror in microcosm. The metaphors, all that have run through from what Kate has presented, the metaphor runs through to the top of our council.
Thank you. Open up for further questions or comments. Yeah.
With the argument, sort of, the counter-argument that if we don't have it here, another city will just take the investment, so something like Paris or another European city, so we'll actually lose out.
Well, let them have it. We don't want it.
So at least,
we don't want it. Let them take it where they want.
So at least if they're here, we've got some avenue to engage with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a danger of a sort of race to the bottom thing going on there, where come in and we won't say a thing, and you can have whatever land you want. So there is a danger of that. Yeah, I mean, you could argue they've brought benefits here. I mean, Jackie spoke very passionately and says that they haven't at all, but a lot of people will say they have. But it's about sending a message and saying you don't just come in here and paint your do your business deals and paint your reputation all over our city. It's about, I mean, I've spent a lot of time here since I started working on this stuff, and I like this place. And I like the people here. It's a good city, it's a great city, and the people genuinely believe that the city has a sort of set of values. So I think it's really powerful when people come together and say, hold on a minute, we're not having this and we're not having you unless you buck up your act. That's my rambling.
Interesting enough, somebody yesterday when I mentioned what I was going to do said Manchester is very greedy. That's interesting. The first time I've kind of heard that and thought that Manchester is very greedy, so maybe just add to that. Any more questions, comments? We've got some time. Go.
Just to pick up on that, I mean, I think when we deal for the retail market, they're not really paying market rate, like you said before.
Could you speak up a little?
Abu Dhabi aren't really paying market rate, so I mean, I don't think anyone should be scared about taking money elsewhere. There's no shortage of investors looking to buy property and develop in Manchester as well. China or Abu Dhabi, they're just two extreme examples, but there's plenty of more acceptable money queuing up, but they don't get lucky because it's all stitch up. But just thinking, what can people actually do about it? How did Chile in 2015 when the Copa America was on? And outside the National Stadium in Santiago, there was mothers that disappeared, demonstrating every single game Chile were playing. And it's really powerful when you see that, because of what they represent and how long they've been looking for justice against the Pinochet regime. And if you had something on like that outside of the Etihad at the time, City, like 25, 30 times a season, 20, 30 people with banners and leaflets saying what you're doing. You pick something like maybe Ahmed Mansour, which is something that really gets the city.
Our Manchester group actually has been vigiling outside the city hall on a monthly basis.
You've got to use football. It's not.
No,
it's not.
I agree.
It's not an issue. Politics, council isn't an issue. People jump on housing because the council turn around and say bringing good into the city. That's the way they'll play it. You take it to football and use football's publicity and everything that goes with that, and the city will start clamping down and try and move anyone demonstrating on. And you start using football, and that's where you create issues and tension, and they will get a much bigger play in the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, I think a big part of this problem is the secrecy behind the business deals between Manchester City Council and the various organisations they deal with. And they continually hide behind commercial confidentiality to deny freedom of information requests. So how do we get around that? Is there any way we can?
Yes. Yes, there is. You can challenge those things. Commercial confidentiality can be challenged. You need to use a public interest argument. It needs to be very well argued. You can also get sections of the report. For example, they've said we're not giving you any of the details of the report between the council and Abu Dhabi, but you can say, well, you don't have to give us all the report, but you have to give me some of the report. Yeah, you can redact parts of it. So actually, I'll talk to you about this later if you want. It's something, there's a group in Manchester International Law School who might be interested in putting something like that together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. What does this partnership and the development it is building suggest about the future of Manchester?
Well, I think, I'm not going to say what I was going to say, actually I want to think about stuff that's already been said really. I think it's incredibly clear that we're talking about a future based on profit for a few. Something that comes up again and again in my work is people talking to me about how the city is selling its soul. I have slight problems with the kind of religious language of souls, but anyway, I think there's something very important happening around, you know, the process of gentrification and privatisation and marketisation that is essentially social cleansing and losing a lot of the richness of our city. And I agree, I absolutely love this place to my bones, but I also really hate it. I'm incredibly frustrated about what's going on, and I think that's because we need to think about the city as a complex load of layers. You know, there's an awful lot of amazing stuff happening on the street level, and you know, Jackie personifies just one of many, many brilliant groups, but actually there's the whole kind of illusion of where the power is, kind of where the smoke and mirrors kind of hide things. So thinking a lot about placemaking, a lot of my work has been about kind of destroying the myth of Manchester. Actually, much as I love this place, you know, we do things differently here, do we bollocks, frankly? We're enthralled to a mythical past that never existed and has always been built on exploitation of most people, you know? The Industrial Revolution was not nice. It was not a mythical golden age. When Engels walked here and wrote here, you know, it wasn't because it was a lovely place. We just need to go back and think about those things. And even actually during the Civil War, we sold weapons to both sides, okay? We weren't a paragon of virtue as a city because the city is messy. And this idea that we're a radical city, yes we are, but in all kinds of ways that are masked by those illusions. You know, I Heart Manchester, I hate that slogan so much because it was a response to riots that were caused by many things. Lack of shopping opportunity was not one of them, but actually our feelings, our love for this place becomes a marketing slogan, and that is, I think, evil, you know. And let's think about, you know, evicting squats, privatising public space, so you can't demo all these things that actually challenge that rhetoric of radicalness. And I guess I would say, I'll stop ranting, but my favourite Manchester writer is Doreen Massey, who is under-celebrated for all kinds of reasons, not least, I think, because she was a woman, she is a feminist geographer, and she was critical of many things. But her vision of place, and I think I'm so happy that Kate was talking about placemaking, because I think that is something to always criticise, because it ignores what was going on before. You know, you can't make a place where people live there, there's always something. Now, her version of place is an idea of a trajectory of journeys. You know, we are all walking, we are all moving, and we are all interconnected, okay? So Massey's version of space is a constellation of stories. I'll talk about it as a great event, I'll keep it very brief now. But essentially what she says are those journeys are international. It's an outward-looking place, you know. We don't want anyone foreign coming in. That is evil, and that is not the Manchester way either, you know. Whatever it is, we're an open, welcoming place, you know, and we're diverse, and we're chaotic, and we're beautiful, and we're messy. We're not closed and inward-looking and saying, no, we don't want you. But those stories are things that we can change, you know. Mass is really attentive to power relations. We are not all the same, but we can all actually change the direction of our travel and collectively others. And I'm really urged to think beyond that and think about making a place that's based on the stories we want, and just keep challenging that narrative. I think that's the really important thing. Whether it's history, whether it's future, we can actually change that in small but important and significant ways.
Okay, thank you. I've got one more question. Feel free to respond to it or whatever.
Yeah. Or just talk to me.
Or just talk.
I really agree.
It's very appreciated, sure. So how has your practice in particular challenged such developments similar over the previous years? What might we learn from those experiences?
I think, you know what, I wish that I could say here and tell you that my 20 years of doing stuff has made a difference. I'm not sure it has, except on a very personal story level. You know, I spend a lot of time talking and walking with people, and something that really comes out, you know, people genuinely care about this place, and they're feeling regret and fear and loss, and really important things because of those layers, you know. So thinking about the labyrinth of the city and what we're able to change, I think is really important. And actually taking care of each other is really important. Celebrating people like Jackie, celebrating, you know, people like John does, for example. That's really important. We've all got stuff we can do and we can change. We are all interconnected, and I think really important thing I want to say is that there are connections between us, and we are much better when we are talking to each other. And really fundamentally, I also just want to say that I don't think the right to housing and the right to human rights shouldn't be in conflict. They're absolutely not. They're part of the same thing. So let's not set that up as this false dichotomy of if we care about human rights, we're going to live in a shithole, because that isn't true. We can find ways of being creative, and actually of Manchester being truly radical, you know. Why don't we think about other ways that are based on community and the base is already here? Because we don't need this place to be made. It's here. And, yeah.
Thank you. Any comments, anything to add, challenges, questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is a direct response to any particular individual, but I do think the tide is turning in Manchester. Like, I think that the housing movement is very strong, and I think, like, yesterday we saw an article come out where the council are going to, for a very long time, talk about building council housing in the city centre. And that's the direct result of the strong housing movement in the Tenants Union, which I'm part of, Great Manchester Housing Action, and like many other organisations that part of this. So I do think the tide is turning, and I think that, yeah, that's partly because of what, I can't remember the bronze guys there.
Okay, we've got shaking heads in different directions going on here. So let's go for that one first, quickly.
I'll believe that when I see it. Yeah. This is coming out because they are getting a little bit afraid of what people are saying, what they've done to the community, particularly Ancoats I could talk about. What they've done to that community, it's absolutely ripped the heart out of it. And I think they now, and I think they knew about this meeting, and that it's so coincidental that that came out in the Manchester Evening News. Mm-hmm. Yep. When it happens, then I believe it.
Okay, and that is how things do move, actually. People
yes.
Start listening. So you're saying the tide is changing. That's good to hold on to, because it also means we feel things can be done rather than taking a defeatist attitude and going nothing can be done. Your response?
Yeah, I was just saying that I agree, actually. I am kind of optimistic, because I think there is a critical mass approaching, actually. And I think even in relation to, for example, heritage concerns are a good example. For a long time, people weren't that bothered, and suddenly there's a concern about the built environment, there's concern about all kinds of things, and I think a lot of it we can't ignore the crisis of people sleeping on the streets, for example. It shouldn't have had to get to this point, but I really do think, I'm incredibly optimistic, and I've been working away from Manchester for a couple of years because I was hugely burnt out, and although I still live here, I've been having a bit of distance, and coming back in, I can feel the energy has changed, and I really do. So yeah, just bloody well done to people that are making it happen, and it will keep happening, and we have to keep that positive vision, actually, because I think that's one of our best You know, I like Rebecca Solnit writes stuff about hope and radical,
Yeah.
and I actually think radical kindness, radical hope, massively important things.
Yeah, I'd recommend that book as well
Yeah.
for that purpose. Actually re-inspiring some hope and some utopia. The other one, Utopia for Realists, is a good one to follow up with.
Back to the houses. I'm wondering, has it been disclosed at all how much the land was bought for, or who's going to be the landlord of these houses because they're rented? Some of them I understand. Well, it just seems like a bit of a God's breakfast.
Well, where I lived, it's all private. There is, you know, the council have sold off the land and let them build on it, and it's private. There's
There's
no
no landlord.
Well, not if you bought it.
Who are the main developers on the site?
Pardon?
Who are the main developers on the site?
Well, where I lived, that is still part of the council because it was a PFI project, which is another failure. So the landlords there are still the council in a way, run by Adapters and Renaissance, a group. So, but just opposite where I live, that has all gone private. They're all, you know, bought either by an investor to rent or bought and they're living in them, so they haven't got a landlord.
So there's no social housing programme?
No,
no,
there's none at all. None of those houses have been replaced by social. None of them.
So what's PFI?
Private finance initiative. It's I don't know the legalities of it, but it's the council put it out to tender to developers, and they became their partners. But you know, it's
okay.
It's failed, hasn't it? It's failed for schools and hospitals. They built them, and we now can't afford to use the hospitals or anything else that they've built because the rent's on them. You rent it back.
Thank you, Jessica. One there and one here, and we're sort of working out what's happening behind the door or near it, downstairs, whatever.
So it's just a quick thought I would like to share with you all. I'm an Amnesty International member, and I am working on the campaign for the three prisoners of conscience, Ahmed Rasool and Mohammed Al-Rohan. And that is something we can all do, and that is raising our voice for these two individuals. And that's why I brought petition lists that are sent to the UAE authorities. And I would like to invite you, before you're leaving the room, to make sure you put your signature on our petitions, and also feel free to approach me if you're interested in working on these cases as well.
And the final question for this, and we will go into groups, so we might just sort of like have the pause for Ben to come in. We're improvising here, as you can see.
The same financial powers involved in this, you know, like the pension fund, Manchester Life, Manchester, they are the same people that are you know, framing and paying for the homeless policy to keep everybody on board with their narrative of what's causing it. It's not them, it's, you know, complex things. And anybody that challenges that or brings evidence to the contrary that challenges their framing of the topic is threatened with having their funding pulled. You know.
Is there a response, and if so, quick?
No, but Snedden, we do need to still keep asking those awkward questions, and those critical voices really matter, because it does feel powerless sometimes, but actually that's only if we let it, so just keep digging and keep getting evidence, you know. And
it co-opted quite a lot of the homeless sector through these financial grooming.
Yeah. My background's in community work, and I had to stop, partly because I was getting so jaded and angry. So yeah, I hear exactly. But okay, thanks.